Yo, what's up, y'all? Welcome in. Another day's of Rivals Down South. Shout out Joshua Perry, Jake Butt leading us in on Red Corner, Blue Corner. This is Rivals. We talk more SEC here. YouTube.com/Watch Stadium. If you want to get involved, I'm T-Bob Abear. He is Huston Mason, former LSU Tiger. He's a former Georgia Bulldog. Now we are both sports talk pontificators. Well, Hudson, what's going on, man? Let's dive right in. Although this is, ostensibly an SEC show, let's head up to Big Ten country as Matt Rule had some very honest comments that kind of shape what all of college football is dealing with currently.
Make no mistake that a good quarterback in the portal costs $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million right now. So just on the same page, right? So let's make sure we all understand what's happening. So there's some teams that have $6 or $7 million players playing for them.
Okay, so here's okay. First off, let's remember Matt Rule is speaking to his people, right? Nebraska has money in their pool, like in their program. They have one of the most passionate fan bases in the country. They have boosters that are going to be willing to pay. In fact, NIL may be one of the best things that's ever happened in Nebraska because all of a sudden it becomes easier to get people to Lincoln because people will move anywhere where you're willing to pay them. So it behooves Matt Rule to say that about the price, right? That said, I don't think anything he said necessarily is dishonest. There's a ton of different directions that you can go with this. Let's start here. Let's start with your Georgia Bulldogs, because right now we have reports that Carson Beck of Georgia are negotiating an incentive package in the $1 million range for him to return next season. First off, Hudson, does any of this surprise you? That feels a little low to me. Like, are you telling me that Carson Beck doesn't already make $1 million right now as the Georgia quarterback?
But I don't know what he makes. And in all honesty, it's hard to believe a lot of these numbers that are being thrown out because unless it's coming from a coach. Look, Matt Rule has no reason to lie. So when it comes from a coach at a major program, I tend to believe it. But last offseason, there were rumors that Georgia and Kirby Smart tried to pursue Caleb Williams in the transfer portal, and the asking price from him and his camp was $4 million. And Georgia said, thanks, but no thanks. So I don't think Kirby Smart really is going to get into the $3, $4, $5, $6 million paying a guy to play. But in this case with Carson Beck, they are trying to convince him to come back. In fact, Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl, who runs the Senior Bowl, said they haven't even extended an invite to Carson Beck. Remember, juniors can now play in the Senior Bowl. Yep. They haven't extended an official invite to Carson Beck because he was told that the Georgia coaches are trying to convince Carson Beck to come back. So with that being said, T-Bob, $1 million, is it too less? Is it too much? It feels about right. $1 million, $1.5 million. What's the big difference? To me, if you want a top quarterback in college football, which Carson Beck is, and if he comes back next year, he should be, then that's the going rate. It's supply and demand in college football, right? It's capitalism in college football. And there's only so many elite quarterbacks in college football. And if you want one, whether you want one to come back or you want to go get one from another roster, that's what it's going to cost in this day and age in college football.
And look, there will be times where you will suffer the sting of this. There will be times maybe the team that you cheer for is the beneficiary of this. I don't think it's an awful thing for the sport. I mean, when you look and you tell me that Carson Beck's thinking about returning, Quinn Ewers is thinking about returning, Jackson Dart has already announced that he is returning. And I get it, right? These guys are dominating football. They're having fun. They don't have to go to the NFL and be professionals, and yet they can still make pseudo-professional level money. And for somebody like Carson Beck specifically, he has a chance to be the number 1 overall pick if he were to return next year. So there's a lot of sitting there. And I think that's good, right? Like everything the NFL has done rule-wise, if we look at the last 20 years, has been to promote quarterback play, to protect quarterbacks, to keep them on the field. Because quality quarterback play makes leagues fun. It makes games fun. And it ruins your season when your guy goes down or maybe leaves or whatnot. Okay, let's start here because you mentioned this idea of free market capitalism, right? And the market is what it is, right? And the bottom line is, I agree. If you believe in capitalism, like, you have to accept that these kids are going to get what people are willing to pay them. One of the big disconnects that feels a bit quaint to me when I hear it right now is this idea of, let's be clear, this is not NIL, this is pay to play. And my deal with that is, well, it always has been, and it was always going to be from day one. Like, you were never going to convince me that a booster who has a company and wanted to hire a player to promote his company, you could never convince me that he thought that the real value in that deal was going to come from that player increasing his business. Now, maybe you get the dual benefit, right? Maybe the player gets famous enough, the advertising's good, and you end up seeing an increase in revenue because of it. I love that. Everything I do in my professional life is based off of advertising. But why Joe Booster is really paying that kid is to play for his favorite school, to put on the purple and gold, to put on the red and black. And the problem is, how do you prove the difference? Because if I just sign a kid to a contract saying, all I expect for him is one commercial, and he gives you that one commercial, well, how do you say that I'm paying him to play my school and not advertise? So to me, this has always been the avenue that it was going down.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, it's all the same, isn't it? I mean, you got boosters, whether a guy is Joe Booster, in your example, wants Carson Beck to speak on behalf of his coffee shop, or that booster donates $500,000 to the Georgia Collective. I mean, all of it is about either attracting talent or retaining talent at the end of the day.
Yes.
So whether you want to call it NIL or pay for play, I'm not getting caught up in that wordsmith game. It's all the same to me. And you know what? That's the world we live in now. It just is. And you can either embrace it, like in business or sports, when your company or your industry experiences a major shift or a major trend shift. You can either lean into it, whether you like it or not, and you can embrace it, or you can get left behind. And that's where we are in college athletics right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of the whole chaos is a ladder theory, right? I mean, look at Lane Kiffin. He has handled the chaos of the transfer portal better than most. And although he had a down middle year, he has used it, or down year last year, he has used it now to create 2 of 3 seasons where Ole Miss has won 10 regular season games, something they had never done in their entire school history up to that point. How about this, Hudson? So with that in mind, we both agree, right, that this just is what it is. Like you said, you can embrace it, et cetera, et cetera. Will this lead, do you think, eventually to a power concentration at the top, right? The haves and the have-nots, where the richest school will simply just get the best players and amass these super teams, and everybody else will be left fighting over the scraps?
I mean, I kind of think we're already there, aren't we? I mean,
frankly, we've always kind of been there. I mean, right? Pre-NIL, who are the teams winning? Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia.
Yeah.
Post-NIL, who are the teams winning? Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. Right. So, yes, to be fair, right, it's just that money is now, instead of being funneled into $200 million facilities with water slides and workout rooms, or, more of that money is going to the players. Imagine that.
Right.
The labor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're already there, and we've been there.
So that gets interesting to me then, because I think I read it wrong at the beginning of all this, and only time will tell, right? With change this massive, there are major ripple effects that take years to see the light of day. But I did think that this was going to lead to just an intense concentration of power at the top, even worse than what we had seen previously. But I've actually seen, in small sample size here, first couple of years, Hudson, I feel like we've seen a democratization, right? All of a sudden, teams are able to plug holes that they could not plug before, that immediately makes them better. And a team that might have gone 4-8 can become an 8-4 team because they got a decent quarterback, or because they got a linebacker that they needed, or a defensive back that they needed, right? I think also an ancillary effect that I did not expect is that you have these great teams like your Alabamas, your Ohio States. They can't hoard the 4- and 5-star talent that they used to be able to in the past. So all of a sudden, if I'm a 4-star offensive lineman and I'm still backing up, I can go to a different school in the same conference, or maybe even a group of 5 school, and I can go begin to play. So it's like the elite teams have been losing talent downward this way. A lot of those group of 5 teams have been getting their talent leached upwards. And so, again, I don't know how this is going to play out long term, but if you just look at this year, it feels like college football as a whole is actually more democratized and a bit better for it, quite frankly.
Yeah, and maybe look, we'll see that play itself out in the 12-game playoff, or where more teams get in, and maybe we'll see teams like I don't know, maybe a Missouri make a run deep into the playoff because they have more they have more depth and they have more talent to compete with some of the upper teams in college football. I just think, tying this back to Carson Beck, Georgia's in the midst of a 29-game winning streak, and if there's one thing I've taken away from this, is that if you want to win at the elite level and win national championships in college football, and you want to sustain that winning, you have to hit on the quarterback every single year. Ask Ohio State this year, and ask Ohio State fans this year, why are they probably not going to make the playoff? Why do they feel a tick down? Because they've had this long run of great quarterbacks, and this year they happened to just have missed. At the beginning of the year, we all thought Alabama probably was going to have an off year at the quarterback position. Who knows? Maybe Saturday it changes, maybe not. But Georgia's amongst the 29-game win streak right now because they hit on Carson Beck again. And so to me, it's always about the quarterback. It's the most important position. And if we're talking about paying Carson Beck $1 million to come back, that to me is well worth it if you're Kirby Smart in Georgia.
It's better than paying Tom Allen $20 million not to work. It's better than paying Jimbo $75 million not to work. It's better than putting another $1 million into the players' lounge for, I don't know, like a hot tub, like whatever. Yes, like the money's always been there. It's just spent in absurd ways. Like, God forbid the labor finally gets a piece of it. And yeah, that would be a great investment for UGA to do that. You mentioned the winning streak there, Hudson. Let's really dive into it next as we continue to break down the SEC championship all week long here on Rivals. Can the Dogs finally turn the tide in Atlanta with the streak on the line? We'll break it down next here on Rivals Down South. Welcome back to Rivals Down South, youtube.com/Watch Stadium. Beauty of all the chat there. Look at this right here. A couple of legends going toe-to-toe. The old master and the old pupil squaring off once again. And let's compare streaks. God, missed the joke there. Let's go streaking, folks. Alabama 2015-16 won 26 games in a row. Georgia in this recent stretch is now in the midst of a SEC record 29-game winning streak. As you can see right there on the screen, Georgia's averaged more points, more yards, and given up less points during that streak. So, undoubtedly, Georgia's streak is more dominant than that of Alabama, and yet it's all on the line. And funnily enough, Hudson, when was the last loss before this streak started itself? To the Alabama Crimson Tide in Atlanta in the 2021 SEC title game. When you start to break down Saturday, do you think that history will repeat itself? Will Saban reign supreme in ATL once again?
No, I think Georgia wins. I actually think it's a lot closer than a lot of people think it is. And, we can get into those reasons why, but Georgia's the better team. They should win. I believe they win. But this is going to be the best team and the best quarterback that Georgia has faced. And we've already documented, it's pretty obvious how Georgia has struggled stopping the run, and they just so happen to be playing the best dual threat quarterback maybe in the country in Jalen Milroe. So when you talk about, hey, outside of Brock Bowers, to me, maybe the biggest conversation piece about the biggest absence if Brock doesn't play would be those two freshman linebackers that are going to be strapping up for Georgia. Rylan Wilson and C.J. Allen, two five-star recruits, but they're freshmen. And if you saw the first play of the Tennessee game go 75 yards for a touchdown, and you heard Kirby Smart talk about, gosh dang it, if you're supposed to fill the A-gap, fill the A-gap. Well, that's what happens when you got freshman linebackers. And then when you got to worry about tackling a mobile quarterback who Kirby Smart just compared to is Lamar Jackson, I mean, to me, as a Georgia fan, that's what's keeping me up at night. Not is Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey going to play. Like, I got two freshman linebackers that have struggled to stop the run, and I got the most mobile quarterback that I got to play this week.
But is this not the sign of the charmed existence of a current Georgia Bulldog fan? All year long, I hear about how bad the run defense is. I mean, who's first in the SEC in rush defense, right? Like, oh, the rush defense is so bad. Who's like first in all the major categories, top 10 in the entire country? If the Georgia rush defense is bad, it's only because it's compared to the rush defenses of old, which were something more divine, near like almost more NFL, like professional. So yes, maybe they're slightly weaker than the past, but this is still an elite Georgia defense that is right there with Alabama. And at the end of the day, as much as I like Milroe, there is a disparity between this Georgia offense and this Alabama offense. Coming out of a conversation about NIL and about transfer portal, that's maybe the most I keep going back to it. There's a couple amazing things Kirby Smart has done building this empire. While he has on one side Alabama at full power, on the other side Dabo Swinney at full power, to emerge out of that and surpass both is mind-boggling. And then again, to do it at a time with NIL and transfer portal where it is harder than ever to recruit talent, more competitive ever to retain talent, and you have to be more judicious than ever with the talent that you're bringing in. Kirby has masterminded it all. And I agree with David Pollack when he says that Kirby clearly is the answer here, is the better coach here. The student has become the master, and I think you're going to feel that come Saturday. Yeah.
There's one thing that sticks out to me about this graphic that we just showed comparing the runs. And for me, for Georgia, it's during the 29-game win streak, T-Bob, they have 3 wins by 7 points or less. Let me repeat that. 29-game win streak, and Georgia basically played 3 games that were competitive. Only 3 times did an opponent able to keep it within 7 points or less. So not only was Georgia able to do this, like you just said, in the hardest era with roster management and all this stuff, but 26 out of the 29 games were essentially almost blowouts. And to do that in the SEC that's produced, 14 of 17 past national championships, the last 4 national championships is it's absurd and unheard of. It's ridiculous.
Royal Pain says UGA's in the 60s in yards per carry given up. Perimeter D, watch Milrow and a breakout game for Jam Miller. My only issue with that is I do think that Georgia's defensive style seems to, well, at least for much of this year, it's been the defensive style that has given Alabama fits, right? Where Georgia's not going to overcommit to the rush. They're going to let their four play up front, and they're going to let everybody else kind of hang back and keep everything underneath them. Alabama wants you to be more aggressive. They want to take advantage of that aggression. They want to use explosive plays. I think Georgia's more base style is going to pay huge dividends this game. Another crazy element about this game, Hudson, is simply the fact that, look, for the last 9 years now, when it gets to this time of year, we've either seen Georgia or Alabama in this SEC title game. And Kirby Smart thinks that his players need to be cognizant. Look, do not take this for granted.
I have an appreciation for this game and how hard it is to win. I mean, it was no different in my experience at Alabama. You know, we had a year that we won a national championship that we didn't win an SEC championship. So, you know, that's happened a couple times in our conference. It's hard to find that in most conferences. I think it speaks to the depth of our conference. It speaks to the how hard it is just to get to the game. I mean, we in some ways, I think Alabama and us have been spoiled, and I don't think some kids appreciate. They think it's a rite of passage, and it's not. It's earned, and it's some of the greatest venues, environments that I've been a part of to play in that game.
And that begs the question, do you believe him when he says that, right? Because I do think there's been an element through the years of Alabama players getting a bit spoiled, Hudson, and that's been one of the reasons for maybe some of the foibles during the dynasty, the trip-ups of the last couple of years. How is Kirby Smart, do you think, fighting his own players giving in to that hubris and saying, no, we just belong here because we do?
Yeah, no, I totally understand where he's coming from. When you run through the SEC and get to the SEC, it seems like Georgia's in Alabama, but Georgia the last 3 years, their season begins the first weekend in December. Let's be honest, doesn't it? If you're a Georgia fan, you're like, oh, sleep through the regular season, then wake up the first weekend in December. And that's where your regular season begins. So, yeah, you do get spoiled as a player. It's like going to Disneyland every single year as a 5-year-old.
It's and it's like, you know, I used to have Alabama buddies who, beginning of the football season, they're looking into plane flights as to wherever the semifinal is, wherever the championship is. It's a charmed existence, to be sure. Coming up next, we'll continue to break it all down here on Rivals Down South. We're just a couple of days away from the SEC championship. This is Rivals Down South. Locke Hesse in the YouTube chat says, perfect analogy. Disney's different every time you go. Each season is different for the Georgia Bulldogs. Yeah, okay, maybe the journey is, but the destination remains the same. They're in Atlanta again this Saturday against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Huston Mason, former Georgia quarterback, what are your keys to the championship game this Saturday?
Yeah, Stars got to play big in big games like this, right? So I look at Carson Beck, and I put the number at about 275 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. If he gets to those numbers or better, I think Georgia wins. And then Georgia defensively, it's about slowing down their star, Jalen Milroe. 75 yards rushing, I would put kind of the over-under at. If he gets over that like he did last week against Auburn and he gets to 100 yards on the ground, Georgia is not containing him very well. He's probably picking up gash plays inside and outside the pocket. So those are some of the keys to win. Your Stars got to play well in games like this. And offensive line, Georgia's done a great job of protecting Carson Beck, top 10 this year, and keeping him clean in sacks. Let's see if Dallas Turner and some of those defensive linemen can change that narrative.
Yeah, one of the interesting things in the Milroe front is kind of who has Alabama actually played during this Milroe rise, right? I mean, we can't really count the LSU defense as being anything. There's like a Kentucky mixed in there. We're going to see just how real this Tide offense in Alabama is this Saturday. Hudson, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone watching. We'll be back with more Rivals Down South tomorrow. Let's have ourselves a Thursday.